James Nixey, thanks very much for joining us this evening. First of all, talk us through what it is that Kyiv is asking for here, and if it gets its way, how likely is it to change the war?
Well, Kiev asks for many things, and quite rightly. And while skeptics would say nothing is having any particular effect, then actually it is the cumulative effect of Kiev's asks which will enable it to win this war if it does. But without these things, I'm afraid it will get beaten by Russia. In this particular case, the current ask is to be able to use Western-supplied weapons inside Russia to hit strategic targets such as airfields and oil refineries, which really throw grit into the Russian machine.
Now, Vladimir Putin is hinting at retaliation if the West does go down this path. What exactly would that involve?
Well, Vladimir Putin does this regularly and all the time, and it's an obvious play. The truth is that there is not much that he can do that he's not doing already. Remember, Russia, unlike the West, is really stretched in this war. The West simply hasn't done enough, whereas Russia is doing all that it can and can't even beat Ukraine with 4 times less of a population. So I think that this is largely a bluff. It knows it's a bluff. The West also knows it's a bluff. And not that you shouldn't take Russian threats seriously when you consider the potential consequences. But at the end of the day, the need to defeat Russia in this war because of its import and its spillover effects makes it very important to do this. And I'm afraid the Americans have been slow in coming to this realization, but perhaps they're coming to it now.
Now, having said that, some Ukraine insiders believe that this discussion about long-range Western missiles is a tactic to coax Russia into ending the war. Do you see that happening?
No, I can't see Russia ending this war without an awful lot more than it already has. Putin wouldn't survive it politically, is a short answer. Russia would need a great deal more in terms of territory and certain guarantees that the West, to say nothing of Kiev itself, could not provide. I'm afraid his ambitions are much greater than what he has right now. Of course, even if there were to be a pause of any kind, be it a ceasefire or an agreement, then Russia would rebuild and try again in the future, I'm sorry to say.
Now, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is due to hold discussions in Washington with the US President Joe Biden. What's likely to emerge from those talks?
Well, it does seem as if the UK is slightly more bullish as far as the use of Western weapons by Ukraine inside Russia is concerned. I think it's not as certainly not as leery of it as, say, the Germans, the French are, if not quite as bullish as, say, the Baltic states and the Nordic states are. Britain's been somewhere in between on this. Of course, Joe Biden's primary motivation in this war has not so much been for Ukraine to win it has to be said, as for America not to get directly involved. So any steps towards that are something he has been leery of himself. But the Americans have, slowly but surely, relinquished their reservations step by step. The problem is the timeline. And can this happen fast enough to save Ukraine or to enable Ukraine to save itself?
Now, in the midst of all these talks, the United States says that it's willing to allow the use of such weapons inside Russia as long as they're not the ones manufactured in the US. But will other countries who make those same weapons be just as hesitant in allowing theirs to be used?
Possibly, yes. So it is something of an artifice saying, yes, it's okay to do it, but just don't use ours or don't use the ones that are made here. At the end of the day, that is really a difference that makes no difference. And it's certainly not something that Ukrainians fighting, spilling their blood on the front line want to be concerned with such niceties. So I really think that we're incrementally getting to the right point, but I doubt that we're just not there yet. But remember, this will not make Ukraine win in and of itself, but it gets it along the way.
Now, as we heard earlier, Russia has expelled 6 British diplomats from Moscow, accusing them of spying and sabotage. Do you think that this move is related to the potential developments in Ukraine?
Yes, probably it is. But it has to be said also that the UK has long been a particular target of Russian ire. Relations between the two are really as bad as they've ever been. And this is just a step short of cutting off diplomatic relations, sending ambassadors back home, closing down embassies, repurposing embassies. We're not there yet, but there's not much more one can do. It was already running on a skeleton staff as it was.
James Nixey from Chatham House there. Thank you very much for joining us.